I ran away the night before my wedding when I found out he was marrying me for my family's money. That's how my story begins, not with a kiss, not with a fairy tale promise, but with a truth sharp enough to tear through satin and lace. I used to believe that love was meant to feel safe, warm, predictable. The kind of feeling you could plan a wedding around and sleep soundly knowing tomorrow would be perfect. For a long time, I thought I had that with Jacob Miller. The afternoon before everything fell apart, I stood in front of a 3-paneled mirror inside Magnolia Bridal, the most exclusive boutique in Savannah. The air smelled of lilies and steam from the iron tool. My mother, Lillian, sat on the couch near the window, beaming as if she were the one getting married. "Sweetheart," she said, eyes glistening. "You look like you stepped out of a dream." I smiled because that's what a good daughter does. Because that's what a soon-to-be bride is supposed to do, smile. The dress was breathtaking, a satin bodice embroidered with tiny pearls, a flowing skirt that shimmered when I moved. But behind my reflection, something in my chest felt off. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe it was the silence between Jacob and me lately, the kind that lingered after phone calls, the kind that made me check my messages twice, wondering if I'd said something wrong. Still, I pushed it down. Everyone told me cold feet were normal. After all, I was marrying Jacob Miller, the man every mother in Savannah said was the catch of the decade. Charming, confident, polite to a fault. His family owned one of the largest real estate firms in Georgia. My parents adored him. My father once said, "He's the kind of man who'll take care of you, Claire. You'll never have to worry." And maybe that was the problem. I didn't want someone to take care of me. I wanted someone to choose me, not my father's reputation, not the Anderson fortune, not the house on Whitaker Street with its white columns and stained glass windows. Just me. But I didn't say that aloud. I told myself I was lucky. That girls like me didn't get to question blessings like this. When we left the boutique, the late afternoon sun painted the city in gold. Spanish moss hung low from the oaks, and the breeze smelled of salt from the river. My best friend, Natalie, looped her arm through mine as we crossed the street. "You nervous?" she asked. "Should I be?" She laughed. "Not unless you're having second thoughts about becoming Mrs. Miller." Mrs. Miller. The word sounded too heavy for my tongue that evening. The rehearsal dinner was hosted at the Millers' mansion, a sprawling estate overlooking the marsh. Candlelight flickered across crystal glasses and white roses. Laughter filled the air, and everyone looked perfect. Too perfect. Jacob stood at the end of the table, hand on my shoulder as he toasted to a lifetime of happiness. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I noticed the way he looked at his parents before every sentence, as if waiting for their approval. I told myself I was imagining it. That's what brides do when they sense something wrong. They imagine peace into existence. When the dinner ended, I lingered by the terrace, staring out over the water. The moon shimmered on the tide, silver and cold. Jacob came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You okay?" He murmured, "Just tired." I said that. He kissed the top of my head, gentle but distant. "Tomorrow's a big day." I nodded. But inside, a voice whispered, "Then why does it feel like the end of something, not the beginning?" Later that night, back in my room, I laid the wedding dress across the bedspread. The pearls glimmered under the lamplight. My phone buzzed with messages, makeup artist confirmations, florist deliveries, friends squealing in excitement. I should have felt joy. Instead, I felt a quiet ache, like standing in a beautiful room and realizing you couldn't breathe. I brushed my hair, tried to picture Jacob waiting at the altar, the way he'd look at me. For a moment, I smiled. For a moment, I almost believed it would all work out, but something deep down, maybe instinct, maybe grace, whispered, "Pay attention." And the next night, when I overheard what I was never meant to hear, I understood why. The night before my wedding, I drove to the Miller's mansion with a box of lemon cupcakes, Jacob's favorite. It was supposed to be a sweet surprise, a small gesture before the chaos of the ceremony. The driveway glowed with soft garden lights, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked. Perfect, even. I parked near the fountain, smoothed the skirt of my dress, and walked toward the front door. No one answered when I rang the bell. I hesitated, then tried the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled of roses and cigar smoke. I heard voices coming from the study, Jacob's deep tone, followed by his mother's crisp southern accent. I smiled, thinking maybe they were finalizing last-minute details for the wedding. But then Jacob laughed, a low, tired sound that didn't belong to the man I knew. "Mom, it's one day. I can handle pretending for one more day." My hand froze on the doorknob. "Pretending?" Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Jacob, this isn't just about one day. You're about to tie yourself to that girl's family for life." "Exactly," he said. "And that's the point. The Andersons own half of the design contracts downtown. Dad's been trying to partner with them for years. Claire's, convenient." For a second, I couldn't breathe. His father's voice joined in, calm and businesslike. Son, we've done enough talking. It's settled. Once you're married, the Anderson connections will open doors no one else can. Jacob sighed. I know. I just wish Samantha would stop calling. She still thinks there's a chance. There isn't, his mother snapped. You made your choice. Silence. Then Jacob whispered, almost to himself, Samantha was never the problem. I still love her. Always will. The cupcake slipped from my hands. The box hit the floor with a dull thud, frosting smearing across the marble. No one heard. They kept talking, about guest lists, about reputation, about me, as if I were an investment, not a woman who'd spent 3 years believing in them. I backed away, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. My knees felt weak, my throat burned, and my vision blurred with tears. I stumbled out the front door, the humid night air crashing into my lungs like a wave. For a long moment, I stood on the porch, shaking. The fountain still glittered, mocking me with its serenity. He didn't love me. He never had. Every date, every kiss, every whispered I love you, all rehearsed, all for show. The man who promised me forever was only buying time. I wanted to scream. To march back in and confront him. But something inside me broke in silence instead. I walked to my car, opened the door, and sat there, trembling. The smell of sugar and lemon lingered on my hands. I thought about calling Natalie. I thought about running home to my mother. But what would I say? That the man I was supposed to marry tomorrow had just confessed to loving someone else? No. I couldn't speak. Not yet. I drove home on autopilot, headlights cutting through the mist. Savannah's streets blurred past, the old oak trees, the cobblestone alleys, the wedding banners that still fluttered downtown. My reflection in the windshield looked like a stranger. When I reached my parents' house, I went straight to my room. The wedding dress was still laid across the bed, glowing under the lamp. I sat beside it and pressed my face into the fabric, trying to cry quietly. How could love vanish so completely? I replayed every memory, every touch, searching for signs I'd missed. There were plenty. The way Jacob avoided eye contact during fittings. How he flinched when people mentioned Samantha. The late-night calls he brushed off as work. It had all been there, hidden beneath the illusion of perfection. My chest ached, but somewhere inside the pain, another feeling began to stir, anger. Cold, clean, steady anger. I wasn't going to marry a man who pitted me. I wasn't going to walk down that aisle and make vows that meant nothing. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, I'd made my decision. I folded the letterhead from my nightstand and began to write. Mom, Dad, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I love you both more than I can say, but I can't marry Jacob. Not after what I heard tonight. Please don't look for me. I need time to remember who I am. Without him, the ink smudged from my tears. But the words were clear. I placed the note on my desk. Took one last look at the dress, and whispered to the empty room. I deserve more than this. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The night before my wedding, I didn't sleep. The letter sat folded on my nightstand, illuminated by the faint glow of the lamp. My hands trembled each time I looked at it. I kept asking myself if I was doing the right thing, if running away would make me a coward, or if staying would make me a liar. The silence of the house pressed against my chest. Down the hall, I could hear my mother moving around in her room, probably checking off last-minute tasks in her head. Tomorrow she would wake early, put on her silk dress, and smile proudly in front of hundreds of guests. She had dreamed of this day since I was little, and I was about to destroy it. But how could I stand at that altar, knowing the man waiting for me didn't love me? I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wedding dress hanging near the window. The satin shimmered softly in the moonlight. It looked beautiful, untouched, like a lie frozen in fabric. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Jacob. I can't do this. Then I deleted it. He didn't deserve an explanation. Not after everything. Outside, the world was quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists before dawn, the city asleep, the air thick with humidity. I packed my suitcase slowly, folding clothes with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. A pair of jeans, a white shirt, a sweater, and the necklace my grandmother gave me when I turned 16. That was all I could take. When I was done, I stood in front of the mirror one last time. My eyes were red and swollen, my hair a tangled mess. I barely recognized myself. The girl staring back wasn't the hopeful bride from yesterday. She looked older, harder. Awake. I whispered to her, "You're doing the right thing." But the truth was, I was terrified. What would people say when they found out I'd disappeared? What would it do to my parents, to their reputation? What if I never found my footing again? Then I thought about Jacob's voice, calm, calculating, as he said Samantha's name. That single memory sliced through every doubt. I slipped the letter into an envelope and placed it on my pillow. The words still echoed in my head, "Please don't look for me." When I opened my bedroom door, the floorboards creaked. I froze, listening. Nothing. My parents were asleep. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out everything else. I crept down the stairs, suitcase in hand, and paused at the front door. The family photos on the wall seemed to watch me as I reached for the handle, my childhood birthdays, my parents smiling, the vacations we took every summer. A lump rose in my throat. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the memories. Then I walked out. The air outside was cool and smelled faintly of honeysuckle. A thin mist rolled over the lawn, and the first traces of dawn touched the horizon. The taxi I'd called earlier idled by the curb, headlights cutting through the darkness. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, helped load my suitcase. "Airport?" he asked. I hesitated, then shook my head. "The Greyhound station." He nodded without question. The city lights blurred as we drove through empty streets. My phone buzzed twice, missed calls from Natalie. I couldn't answer. If I did, I'd lose my nerve. When we reached the station, the driver handed back my suitcase. "You okay, miss?" I forced a small smile. "I will be." Inside, the terminal smelled like coffee and rain-soaked concrete. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I bought a one-way ticket to Atlanta, the next bus leaving at 5:30 a.m. The clerk didn't ask why I was traveling in a wedding week haze, still wearing the remains of yesterday's makeup. Maybe he'd seen enough runaways not to question it. I sat near the back, clutching the ticket like it was proof of something sacred. Around me, strangers dozed in their seats, a young mother with a baby, an old man snoring softly. Life went on, indifferent to the wreckage of mine. When the bus finally pulled out of Savannah, the city faded behind me, its moss-draped trees and cobblestone streets dissolving into gray dawn. I pressed my forehead to the window and watched the reflection of my face slide past the sleeping world. I thought of my mother waking soon, finding the letter. The image made my throat tighten. She'd cry first, then get angry. My father would make phone calls, send people looking for me. By noon, my name would be whispered through Savannah society like a scandalous headline, "The runaway bride of Whitaker Street," but beneath the guilt, there was a flicker of relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't have to pretend. Miles rolled by. The sun climbed higher, turning the fields gold. The rhythm of the road lulled me into a daze, somewhere between exhaustion and freedom. I didn't know what awaited me in Atlanta. I had no job, no apartment, no plan. Just the raw, aching truth that I'd rather face uncertainty than a lifetime of lies. As the city skyline appeared in the distance, a strange calm settled over me. I whispered to myself, "This is where I begin again." And I meant it. I reached Atlanta with a single suitcase and the letter tucked away like a private wound. For the first weeks, the city felt both cruel and generous, cruel in its indifference, generous in its mercy of anonymity. My first room was above a laundromat, a narrow space that smelled of detergent and old wood. The landlord, a woman named Doris, exchanged my money for a key and a curt nod. She did not ask questions. I learned quickly that in Atlanta, survival was practical. Bills waited, and sympathy did not pay rent. Job hunting felt like auditioning for a life I had not prepared for. I walked into interviews with the only suit left unwrinkled, rehearsing polite confidence while my insides trembled. At a small design boutique, the manager smiled and told me they liked my portfolio, then admitted they preferred candidates who knew local contractors. At a corporate office, my application vanished into a stack of resumes like a single leaf in a storm. Rejection became a pulse, regular and unavoidable. Loneliness arrived heavy. I ate takeout in my cramped room, the glow of my phone the only company on many evenings. Sometimes I called my mother and listened to her speak of floral arrangements and cancelled plans, answering only with neutral reassurances. I lied to protect her from the jagged truth I feared would break her heart. Small kindnesses were what kept me upright. The barista at the corner coffee shop learned my order and smiled as if she knew my life had been rearranged. A neighbor left a casserole at my door the week I was too tired to cook. An elderly man on the bus returned my dropped glove and muttered, "Been there myself." These tiny humans, unremarkable and generous, made the city less unforgiving. I took on whatever work I could find, freelance design projects, temp data entry, odd jobs that paid enough for coffee and a bus pass. One small design contract led to another. A nonprofit asked me to help with a leaflet. A boutique needed someone to update their social media graphics. Each task was a thread, and slowly I stitched a small safety net. My first real break came from a modest agency near Midtown. They offered me a junior position, trial basis, minimal pay, but an opportunity. The office smelled of ink and paper, and the hum of printers felt like a new kind of heartbeat. My hands shook the first time I used their design software, but I kept showing up, staying late when projects ran over and staying early when deadlines loomed. Payday felt like baptism. For the first time since I left Savannah, I counted my money without the shadow of someone else's account. I paid rent, bought a lamp for my nightstand, and treated myself to a decent meal that tasted of independence. It was small, but the pride was disproportionate and beautiful. Work taught me humility and the quiet dignity of making things that mattered to others. There were nights I misread a client brief, mornings I corrected a layout so many times the letters blurred. Each mistake taught me to fix, to learn, to ask for help. My colleagues, mostly a ragtag band of earnest creatives, offered guidance and patience. They became a makeshift family in a city where family had to be chosen. I also learned to guard myself. Atlanta was kind to the persistent and indifferent to the fragile. I scrolled past rumors and mentions of Jacob on social media, each notification like a pebble dropped into a pond, ripples that cooled quickly. I did not permit old wounds to dictate my days. Instead, I measured my progress by small markers: a positive client review, a completed portfolio piece, a saved $100 in a jar on my dresser. Friendships in the city formed slowly. I began to accept invitations to after-work drinks and neighborhood art walks, conversations soft and tentative at first, later confident. Maya loved secondhand furniture and dragged me to flea markets until I learned to spot an authentic mid-century lamp. Tomas, the copy shop owner, lent me his back room for freelance edits and refused payment more than once. There were humiliations, too. I once printed the wrong dates on a stack of event invites and watched in horror as a client called, furious. My cheeks burned then with something like shame, but the agency covered for me, and the crisis taught me meticulousness. I learned to double-check, to breathe, to remember that errors were temporary and fixable, beyond work. I cultivated small rituals that steadied me: Sunday walks through a sunlit park, a favorite table at a diner where the waitress wrote my name without asking, a cheap terracotta pot in which I coaxed a basil plant to live. I kept a journal, not with grand plans but with a tally of small victories: a client compliment, a bus ride where I didn't feel panic, a night I slept through entirely. As seasons shifted, so did my confidence. I took evening classes to sharpen my skills and pitched a redesign concept to a local shelter that was adopted and publicized. Successes were modest but incremental, like pebbles building a cairn. Each completed project bolstered the belief that I could build a life not as a footnote to someone else's success, but as the author of my own work. Still, sometimes the past intruded, Jacob's face in a memory, the crisp exchange I'd overheard replaying in the quiet. Those moments stung with betrayal, but they no longer had the power to define me. Instead, those memories became fuel, a reminder of the reasons I had fled and the boundaries I would not cross again. By autumn, I had a steady paycheck, a small roster of clients, and a circle of people who knew my laugh and my flaws. My apartment was cluttered with work samples and thrifted furniture but felt like mine. I had become, in small but real ways, the person I wanted to be: capable, chosen by myself, and quietly free. It was raining the morning he came back. The kind of rain that turns the air silver and makes the city sound like a whisper. I was running late to work, juggling my umbrella and a stack of presentation boards, when I saw him, standing by the building entrance like a ghost who'd lost his way. Jacob. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. The man in front of me looked older, thinner. His expensive suit clung damply to his frame, and his hair, once meticulously styled, now curled messily in the drizzle. But those eyes, blue-gray and pleading, were unmistakable. Clare. His voice cracked on my name. I froze. My mind went blank, and then every sound came rushing back: the rain, the honk of passing cars, my own heartbeat. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. He smiled, tentative, as if I were a frightened animal he needed to coax closer. "I've been trying to find you for months." I wasn't hiding. He flinched a little at that, looking down at the wet pavement. "I know. I just didn't know where to start." I wanted to walk past him, pretend he was a stranger. But curiosity, or maybe closure, held me in place. "Why are you here, Jacob?" He took a hesitant step forward. "Because I was wrong. About everything." I said nothing, letting the rain fill the silence. "I called off the wedding the next morning," he continued. "When you disappeared, I panicked. My parents were furious, the guests confused, and he laughed bitterly. I realized I'd built my life on other people's expectations." I crossed my arms. "And now you've decided you want me back?" He met my eyes, desperation flickering behind his composure. "I never stopped thinking about you. Samantha, she wasn't what I remembered. I ended things months ago. Claire, stop." My voice was calm, but my pulse hammered in my throat. "You don't get to say my name like that. Not anymore." He blinked, startled. I continued, my words deliberate, each one measured like a boundary being redrawn. "You didn't love me, Jacob. You loved what I represented, a way to fix your father's business deals, a woman who would look good standing beside you at charity events. You told your parents exactly that." His face drained of color. "You heard?" "I heard everything." The rain thickened, drumming against the awning above us. He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't let him. "Do you have any idea what it felt like?" I said. "To realize the man I thought loved me was only acting out of convenience? To wake up every morning wondering what part of our life together had been real?" Jacob stepped closer, voice trembling. "It was real for me. Eventually. I just didn't see it until I lost you. That's not love, I said softly. That's regret. For a long moment, we just stood there, two people connected by a story that no longer belonged to either of us. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. The same velvet one he'd used for my engagement ring. I kept it, he said quietly. Not to win you back. Just to remember what I ruined. I stared at it, then at him. You should let it go, Jacob. Like I did. He swallowed hard. So that's it? Yes, I said. That's it. His shoulders sagged, as if the weight of the last year finally settled where it belonged. He nodded, almost to himself. You look happy, he said. I am. He smiled, a faint, broken thing. Then I guess that's enough. He turned to leave, hesitated once, then walked away into the rain. I watched until the gray swallowed him whole. When he was gone, I felt something unexpected, not anger, not triumph, but peace. The kind that comes when a story finally ends the way it was always meant to. At work that day, I kept waiting for the sadness to hit. But instead, I felt light. Lighter than I had in years. During lunch, Maya noticed my quiet mood and nudged me playfully. You okay? You look like you just got rid of a ghost. I smiled. Maybe I did. That night, I returned home, brewed tea, and sat by the window watching the rain taper off. The city glowed beneath the streetlights, imperfect, alive, and utterly mine. For months, I'd imagined how I'd feel if Jacob ever came back. I thought I'd want explanations, maybe even revenge. But when faced with him, I realized I didn't need either. His apology didn't erase the betrayal, and my forgiveness didn't mean I wanted him in my life. Some endings didn't need closure. They needed distance. I opened my journal and wrote, I didn't run away. I walked toward myself, and for the first time, the words didn't feel like a defense. They felt like the truth. Healing doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in the slow, unglamorous accumulation of quiet days. After Jacob's visit, I thought my world might tilt again, that the ghosts I'd buried would find their way back into my ribs. But they didn't. Instead, life in Atlanta resumed its rhythm, the morning rush, the sound of the espresso machine downstairs, the hum of printers at work. Each ordinary moment wrapped around me like a shield. Weeks passed. The city moved from the damp chill of early spring to the forgiving warmth of May. I poured my energy into projects, late nights sketching layouts. Mornings filled with client calls, afternoons wandering through hardware stores for color samples. The busyness steadied me. Roman Hayes joined our agency that summer. He wasn't remarkable in the way Jacob had been, no grand gestures, no practiced charm. He was quiet, methodical, with the kind of calm that made people listen without realizing they were doing it. He transferred from a firm in Chicago, looking for a slower pace. The first day I met him, he was struggling with the office printer, muttering under his breath. I offered help. He smiled in relief and said, I owe you a coffee. I didn't take him up on it at first. I'd learned to keep walls high and gates narrow. But Roman was patient, not in a waiting for you kind of way, more in a living his life and letting you walk alongside kind of way. We ended up collaborating on a campaign for a local art museum. Our styles were different. I chased emotion, he chased structure. Somewhere between his clean lines and my messy sketches. The work found balance, and so did we. He'd linger by my desk after meetings, asking about colors and fonts but somehow making the conversation about everything else, where I was from, what brought me to Atlanta, what I missed about home. I never told him the full story, not then. I just said, I needed a fresh start. He nodded, as if that explained everything. One Friday evening, after a long week, he asked if I wanted to grab dinner. We ended up at a small diner near Piedmont Park, the kind with neon lights and red leather booths. He ordered a cheeseburger. I ordered pancakes, because breakfast for dinner felt like rebellion. I like that you don't pretend, he said halfway through the meal. I laughed. Pretend what? To have it all figured out. It wasn't flirtation, just observation. That was the thing about Roman, he noticed quietly. He noticed when I tapped my pen while thinking, when I pushed my hair behind my ear before disagreeing in meetings, when I went silent after someone mentioned weddings. But he never pushed. Our friendship grew like vines, slowly, naturally, finding sunlight where it could. He'd walk me to the bus stop some evenings, hands in his pockets, talking about architecture and old movies. Once, when I caught a cold, he left soup and orange juice at my door with a note that said, "Get well soon." No deadlines allowed. There was no rush between us. No dramatic declarations. Just the steady hum of two lives aligning. One evening, months later, the agency hosted a networking event. The room buzzed with conversation, glasses clinking, laughter bouncing off the walls. I dressed in a simple black dress, hair down, no expectations. Roman found me by the buffet table, holding 2 glasses of champagne. To surviving another week, he said. I smiled, clinking my glass against his. Barely. As the night wore on, people drifted to the dance floor. A slow song started playing, The Way You Look Tonight. I hesitated, but Roman extended his hand. Just one dance, he said, eyes kind out. We swayed under the dim lights, the city glittering through the tall windows. For the first time in years, I let myself relax into someone's presence. No performance, no pretending. Just breath and rhythm and warmth. When the song ended, he didn't let go immediately. His thumb brushed against my hand, a small, wordless question. I'm not good at this, I whispered. He smiled softly. Then we'll take it slow. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and realized I wasn't afraid. Not of being hurt, not of being loved. Just open. Roman and I never defined what we were, not right away. There were dinners, long walks through the park, lazy Sundays with coffee and design sketches scattered across the table. He made space for my silences, and I made room for his steadiness. Once, during a quiet evening at my apartment, he said something that stayed with me. Love isn't about rescue, Claire. It's about recognition. You see someone clearly, and still choose them. It was the first time I understood what love could be when it wasn't built on illusion. By autumn, we were inseparable. My coworkers teased, friends noticed, and even Doris, my landlord who never cared for small talk, commented, "You look lighter these days." She wasn't wrong. One morning, as I prepared for work, sunlight streamed through the window, catching on the basil plant I'd nursed for months. It had grown tall, leaves reaching for the light. I smiled, realizing I'd done the same. When Roman called that evening, suggesting dinner at the diner where we'd first eaten together, I said yes without hesitation. Over pancakes and coffee, he reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "You know, you don't have to wait for perfect. Sometimes happiness just shows up." I looked at him, really looked, and felt something settle inside me. A quiet knowing. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not fireworks or grand confessions, but peace. The kind that makes you exhale and realize you're home. 2 years after I left, I found myself driving down the familiar tree-lined roads of Savannah, Spanish moss swaying like green lace in the wind. The city looked the same, graceful, timeless, but I wasn't the same woman who'd fled it in tears. Roman was the one who suggested I go back. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," he said, "but sometimes closure feels like breathing out after holding your breath for too long." He was right. The Anderson house hadn't changed. The white columns still gleamed, the porch still creaked, and my mother's garden was still overflowing with roses. When I stepped out of the car, I half expected to feel guilt or fear. Instead, I felt nostalgia, soft, almost sweet. My mother opened the door before I could knock. For a second, she just stared at me, hand over her mouth. Then she rushed forward, wrapping me in an embrace that smelled of lavender and home. "Claire," she whispered, voice trembling. "You came back." "I'm sorry it took me so long," I said, tears pricking my eyes. She held me at arm's length, studying my face. "You look different. Happier." "I am." My father appeared behind her, his once stern eyes misting with emotion. "You gave us quite a scare, young lady." "I know," I said softly. I needed to find myself." He nodded, as if he understood more than he let on. "Then I'm proud of you." That night, we sat on the porch eating peach cobbler, talking about everything and nothing. They told me how the news of my disappearance had caused a stir in Savannah society, how Jacob's family had been humiliated. And how, eventually, people moved on. "He married Samantha," my mother said casually. Spoon clinking against her bowl. My breath caught, but only for a second. "Did he?" She nodded. "A small wedding. I heard they have a little boy now." I smiled faintly. "Good for them." And I meant it. The next morning, I went for a walk through Forsyth Park. The air smelled of jasmine and rain. Children's laughter echoed near the fountain, and the world felt simple again. I stopped by a small cafe for coffee, scrolling through emails when I heard someone say my name, "Claire?" I turned, and there he was. Jacob stood a few feet away, holding a takeaway cup in one hand and a stroller in the other. Samantha walked beside him, a toddler clutching her fingers. They looked ordinary, domestic, happy in the way I once thought we'd be. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Then Jacob smiled, hesitant but genuine. "It's been a long time." "It has," I said, matching his calm. Samantha gave a polite nod. "Hi, Claire. I've heard a lot about you." I nodded back. "Good things, I hope." She laughed softly. And for a moment, I saw no rivalry, no bitterness, just two women who had both learned hard lessons about love. Jacob looked at me, his eyes flicking between apology and something like admiration. "You look well." "I am," I said simply. There was nothing else to say. No lingering pain, no unsaid confessions. Just closure, quiet and clean. I wished them a good day, smiled at their little boy, and walked away. My chest felt light, as if a knot had finally unspooled. On the drive back to my parents' house, sunlight streamed through the trees, dappling the road. The city I once associated with heartbreak now shimmered with forgiveness. I realized that I didn't hate Jacob. I didn't pity him either. I was simply done. That evening, I sat on the porch again, watching the sun melt into the horizon. My mother joined me with 2 cups of tea. You were brave to leave, she said quietly. I didn't understand it then. I do now. I smiled. Leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. But staying would have been harder. She reached over, squeezing my hand. You've grown into someone I'm proud of. Later, when I returned to Atlanta, Roman was waiting for me at the station. He didn't ask how it went. He just took my bag, slipped his hand into mine, and smiled. How does it feel to go home? He asked. I looked out at the skyline, at the place that had given me back my life. Like I never really left, I said. Just came back to myself. He pulled me close, and for a long while, we stood in the quiet hum of the city that had saved me. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that girl in the wedding dress, the one who ran away under the weight of heartbreak and fear. I wish I could tell her that the pain would one day soften into wisdom. That she'd find love again, not in another person first, but in herself, because that's what freedom really is, not escape, but return, to truth, to peace, to the version of yourself that existed before you were told what you should be. And if anyone ever asks why I left, I'll tell them this: I didn't run away from a wedding. I walked toward my life.